We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Perfect Lies. Thomas Reeves stood before his bathroom mirror, his weathered hands working the knot of his navy silk tie. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who had spent 2 decades in courtrooms, facing down judges and prosecutors alike. His brown eyes, sharp and calculating, studied his reflection as he prepared for another day of battle in the criminal justice system. The premature gray at his temples had started appearing 5 years ago, right around the time he'd won his first high-profile murder case. Each victory since then had added another streak, like notches on a veteran warrior's blade. His shoulders, broad and solid, bore the slight forward tilt of a predator ready to strike. Thomas. Adriana's voice carried up from downstairs, her Argentine accent adding a musical lilt to his name. You're going to be late for court. He allowed himself a small smile, remembering their first meeting in Buenos Aires. She'd been a force of nature then, a law student with revolutionary ideas and fire in her eyes. Now she managed PR for Henderson and Associates with ruthless efficiency, though sometimes he caught glimpses of that same fire when she orchestrated particularly devastating media campaigns against their opponents. Coming, he called back, giving his reflection one final assessment. The Thomas Reeves that stared back at him was a weapon, honed by years of defending the indefensible, of finding the holes in seemingly airtight cases and exploiting them without mercy. Downstairs, Adriana was reviewing documents at the kitchen counter, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. She glanced up as he entered, her eyes scanning him with the same attention to detail she brought to everything in their life together. The Martinez case closes today, she asked, though they both knew she was perfectly aware of his schedule. Final arguments, Thomas confirmed, pouring coffee into his travel mug. Michael's already at the courthouse. He texted me earlier, Adriana said, her tone casual. He thinks the DNA evidence might be an issue. Thomas's hand stilled for a fraction of a second. Since when does Michael text you about case details? Since I need to prepare press statements for every possible outcome, she replied smoothly, standing to straighten his tie. Her perfume was different today, something new and unfamiliar. You know how these high-profile cases can be. The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted them as their daughter Rebecca appeared, already dressed for school in her senior uniform. At 17, she was a perfect blend of them both, Adriana's dark hair and Thomas's penetrating gaze. Dad, can I talk to you later? Rebecca asked, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. It's about school stuff. Thomas noted the slight hesitation in her voice, the way her eyes flickered briefly to Adriana before meeting his again. Of course, I should be home for dinner. If the verdict comes in, Adriana added, gathering her papers into her briefcase. The verdict will come in, Thomas stated with quiet certainty. James Martinez isn't going to prison today. The drive to the courthouse gave Thomas time to review the case in his mind. 2 dead business competitors, both with Martinez's DNA at the scene. It was too perfect, too neat. Something about it had needled at him from the beginning, but he couldn't quite grasp what it was. The courthouse steps were already crowded with reporters when he arrived. Michael Whitman waited at the top, his characteristic grin in place, as cameras flashed around them. There's our star, Michael called out, clapping Thomas on the shoulder as he reached the top. Ready to make history? Thomas studied his best friend's face, the same face he'd known since their first day of law school. Michael's blue eyes held their usual confidence, but there was something else there too, something Thomas couldn't quite read. History's already been made, Thomas replied. We're just here to record it. Inside, the familiar bustle of the courthouse surrounded them. Court clerk David Foster caught Thomas's eye as they passed, making a slight movement as if to speak, then seeming to think better of it. Thomas had known David for years. They played poker together every month, and lately, something had been off about him. In the men's room before court convened, Thomas heard voices from the last stall. He recognized them immediately, James Martinez and Michael. They promised me protection, Martinez was saying, his voice tight with anxiety. Where is it? Keep your voice down, Michael hissed. Everything's handled. Just stick to the plan. Thomas stepped back silently, his mind already analyzing this new piece of information. Who were they? What plan? He filed it away for later consideration as he made his way to the courtroom. Detective Samantha Keller was already seated in the gallery when they entered. Her dark skin contrasted sharply with her crisp white shirt as she watched them with unblinking focus. She'd been thorough in her investigation. Too thorough, perhaps. Thomas had noticed her lingering after proceedings, taking notes long after everyone else had left. All rise. The bailiff called out, and Thomas pushed everything else aside. It was time to perform. His closing argument was a masterpiece of legal rhetoric, dismantling the prosecution's case point by point. He drew the jury's attention to the inconsistencies in the timeline, the lack of motive, the suspicious perfection of the DNA evidence. The prosecution would have you believe that my client, a successful businessman and father, methodically planned and executed 2 murders. Thomas addressed the jury, his voice filling the courtroom. They want you to accept that he was brilliant enough to arrange these deaths without witnesses, without surveillance footage, without a single piece of concrete evidence linking him to the actual crimes, yet somehow careless enough to leave his DNA at both scenes. He paused, letting the contradiction sink in. The truth is simpler and far more disturbing. Someone wanted James Martinez to take the fall for these murders. Someone with access to resources, with knowledge of police procedures, with the ability to plant evidence. The prosecution hasn't just failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. They've failed to consider that they might be prosecuting an innocent man while the Rayal killers walk free. As he returned to his seat, Thomas caught Detective Keller's eye. Something in her expression made him pause. Not surprise or admiration at his performance, but recognition. As if he'd just confirmed something she'd already suspected. The jury filed out for deliberations, and the waiting game began. Thomas spent the recess in his office, reviewing case notes. A knock at his door revealed David Foster, the court clerk's face lined with worry. "Thomas, I need to tell you something," David began, his hands fidgeting with his tie. "It's about—" Michael's voice boomed down the hallway. "There you are. The jury's coming back." David's face fell, and he stepped back. "Never mind. It's nothing." Thomas watched him hurry away, adding another piece to the puzzle he couldn't quite see. His phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca. "Dad, can we talk? It's important." He dialed her number immediately, stepping into an empty conference room. "What's wrong?" "Mom's been acting weird." Rebecca's voice trembled slightly. "I saw her delete messages when I walked in yesterday. And Michael's been coming over a lot when you're working late." Thomas felt ice form in his stomach, but his voice remained steady. "How often is a lot?" "At least twice this week." They go into Mom's home office and close the door. "Dad, something's not right." "I'll handle it," Thomas promised, his mind already calculating possibilities and consequences. "Don't let them know you've told me anything." As he ended the call, he noticed a business card had been slipped under the conference room door. Detective Keller's name was printed on one side. On the back, in neat handwriting, "We need to talk about your wife." Thomas stared at the card for a long moment, then tucked it into his pocket. First, he would win this case. Then he would deal with whatever game was being played behind his back. And if his suspicions proved correct, well, Thomas Reeves hadn't spent 20 years defending killers without learning a few things about justice. The jury returned with their verdict, but Thomas barely heard the words. His mind was already several moves ahead, plotting out the board like a chess master. Someone had made the mistake of thinking they could play him for a fool. They were about to learn why even his enemies called him the shark behind his back. As the not guilty verdict was read, Thomas watched Michael's celebration with new eyes. His friend's smile seemed different now, less genuine, more like a mask. And somewhere in the courthouse, David Foster's car keys lay in his pocket, never to be used again. Chapter 2. The Setup. Detective Samantha Keller had spent 15 years in law enforcement learning to trust her instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming as she watched Thomas Reeves deliver his closing argument. The DNA evidence in the Martinez case wasn't just convenient. It was manufactured. She'd seen enough crime scenes to know when something was too clean, too perfect. From her seat in the gallery, she observed the dynamics playing out before her. Michael Whitman's constant glances at his phone. Adriana Reeves's unexpected appearance halfway through the proceedings. Her designer heels clicking against the floor as she slipped into a back row. The way James Martinez seemed more afraid of his own defense team than the prospect of prison. During a recess, Samantha made her way to the courthouse bathroom, timing it perfectly to encounter Adriana Reeves touching up her makeup. Impressive defense strategy, Samantha commented, washing her hands. Your husband has quite a talent for finding holes in DNA evidence. Adriana's hand paused for a fraction of a second as she applied her lipstick. Thomas is very good at his job. Must be difficult, though, Samantha continued casually, balancing such high-profile cases with family life. I imagine you don't see much of each other these days. We manage. Adriana's tone was clipped as she dropped her lipstick into an expensive handbag. If you'll excuse me, detective. Samantha watched her leave, noting the slight tension in her shoulders. The woman was hiding something big enough to make her nervous around a detective who officially had no reason to be interested in her. Across town, Rebecca Reeves sat in her best friend Lauren Martinez's bedroom, both girls hunched over Lauren's laptop. They'd been best friends since freshman year, brought closer by the shared experience of having fathers involved in the legal system. One is a defender, one is a defendant. Look at this, Lauren whispered, pulling up a folder of scanned documents she'd found in her father's study. These contracts, they're all with shell companies owned by the Callahan family. Dad's business was just a front. Rebecca felt her stomach twist. The Callahan name was notorious in their city. Everyone knew they were involved in organized crime, but no one could ever prove it. And now here was evidence linking them directly to the Martinez case. There's more, Lauren continued, her voice shaking. I found emails between my dad and your mom. From 6 months ago. They were planning something, Becca, something about making sure your dad didn't discover the truth about the business connections. Rebecca thought about the strange conversations she'd overheard lately, the way her mother jumped whenever her phone buzzed. We need to tell my dad. We can't. Lauren grabbed her arm. They'll kill my father if anyone finds out he kept these records. The only reason he agreed to this whole thing was to protect me. At Henderson and Associates, Rachel Reeves was beginning to wish she'd never taken the job as forensic accountant. Her brother Thomas had recommended her for the position, proud of her expertise in tracking financial crimes. But lately, every attempt to investigate discrepancies in the firm's books was met with immediate pushback from Adriana. I need those files for the quarterly audit, Rachel insisted, standing in Adriana's office doorway. The audit has been postponed, Adriana replied without looking up from her computer. Direct orders from Michael. We're too busy with the Martinez case. That's the third postponement this year. The numbers aren't adding up, Adriana. The partner distributions, the case expenses, I said it's postponed. Adriana's voice could have frozen flame. Unless you prefer to take your concerns to the managing partners? Rachel retreated, but her mind was working overtime. That evening, she began creating backup copies of everything she could access, storing them securely off-site. Something was very wrong at Henderson and Associates, and she had a feeling her brother was somehow at the center of it. The new paralegal, Marcus Rodriguez, noticed things others missed. His military intelligence training had taught him to observe patterns, to see the connections others overlooked. He documented everything. Michael Whitman's private meetings with judges who later presided over his cases. Adriana's late-night visits to the evidence room. The way certain case files disappeared from the system, only to reappear with subtle changes to dates and details. Marcus kept his own encrypted database, recording times, dates, and participants. He noted how often Thomas was assigned cases that kept him out of the office during important firm meetings. How Adriana always seemed to know details about cases she shouldn't have access to. How Michael's win rate had mysteriously improved over the past year, while Thomas's cases grew increasingly complex and time-consuming. The day before the verdict, David Foster's death shook the courthouse. The official report called it an accident, a tragic case of falling asleep at the wheel. But Marcus had seen David arguing with Michael Whitman that morning, had noticed the court clerk's hands shaking as he'd left the building for the last time. Thomas received the news during trial preparation. His face revealed nothing, but Marcus saw his hands clench briefly under the conference room table. That same afternoon, Marcus observed Adriana making a phone call from the parking garage instead of her office. The first time he'd seen her break her routine of conducting all business from behind her desk. The pieces were there, forming a pattern that pointed to something massive. Marcus just hoped he could figure it out before anyone else ended up wrapped around a tree on a dark road. That evening, as the jury deliberated, Marcus watched Thomas receive a text message that made him go completely still. Within minutes, Detective Keller appeared in the courthouse, slipping a business card under the conference room door. Marcus added it to his timeline, another data point in an increasingly concerning pattern. In her own office, Detective Keller was building a different kind of timeline. Her wall held photographs, documents, and sticky notes, all connected by red string. At the center was a photo of Michael Whitman, taken 5 years ago when he'd helped her ex-husband destroy her career. She'd spent those years gathering evidence, watching patterns, waiting for the right moment. The Martinez case had given her that moment. The DNA evidence was too perfect because it had been planted, just like the evidence that had nearly ended her career. She recognized the signature, the attention to detail that only someone with intimate knowledge of police procedures would know to include. But this time, she had an ally. Thomas Reeves wasn't just a brilliant defense attorney. He was a man about to discover that everything he believed about his life was built on perfect lies. And Samantha Keller knew from experience that nothing was more dangerous than a good man who discovered he'd been betrayed by those he trusted most. Chapter 3. The Frame. The storm that broke over the courthouse matched Thomas Reeves's mood perfectly as he prepared to deliver his closing argument. 3 days of watching his wife and best friend, noting their subtle glances and carefully timed exits, had confirmed his worst suspicions. But Thomas hadn't survived 20 years in criminal defense by showing his hand too early. Detective Keller's words from their private meeting echoed in his mind. Your DNA wasn't accidentally at those crime scenes. Someone put it there. Someone with access to your personal items. The evidence she'd shared was damning. Security footage showed Adriana entering the evidence room after hours on multiple occasions, with Michael following minutes later. Each visit corresponded with new DNA findings in the Martinez case. The jury will see right through this, Michael had assured him earlier, squeezing his shoulder with what now felt like mock concern. The DNA evidence is solid. Yes, Thomas had replied, studying his friend's face. Almost too solid, wouldn't you say? A flicker of something, fear, concern, had crossed Michael's features before his usual confident smile returned. That's why we're paid the big bucks, partner. We find the holes others miss. Thomas took his position before the jury, his voice steady as he began dismantling the prosecution's case. With each point he made, he watched Michael's reactions from the corner of his eye. 3 hours into deliberation, his phone buzzed, a message from Rebecca that would change everything. Dad, I'm sending you something important. Don't react. Just watch. The video loaded on his phone. Adriana, in their living room, raising a champagne glass. The room was filled with familiar faces from the firm, all laughing, celebrating. Michael stood at the center, his arm around Adriana's waist. To Thomas, Adriana's voice rang clear through the phone speaker. Who never suspected a thing. The DNA plans worked perfectly. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Thomas's fingers tightened around his phone as Michael's voice joined in. And to the perfect wife, who made it all possible, who knew those morning routines would give us exactly what we needed. The video continued, showing Michael dropping to one knee before Adriana, producing a ring. The gathered crowd cheered as she accepted, their celebration of betrayal complete. Thomas shut off his phone, his face revealing nothing of the rage burning inside him. The jury was still deliberating, and he had a job to finish. The time for retribution would come later. Frank Torres, the courthouse security guard, approached Thomas during the last recess. Mr. Reeves, he said quietly, I've been keeping records. Times, dates, security footage. Things I've seen Mr. Whitman and your wife doing after hours. If you need them, keep them safe, Thomas interrupted, his voice low and controlled. You may be called upon soon. The verdict came back. Not guilty. Thomas accepted the congratulations of his peers with a practiced smile, all while cataloging each person who'd been at that celebration, each face in the video who'd laughed at his expense. In the courthouse bathroom, he finally allowed himself a moment alone. The mirror reflected a man transformed, not broken, but hardened. They tried to destroy him, to frame him for murders he didn't commit. Instead, they created something far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose. His phone buzzed again. Detective Keller, my office. Tonight. Bring the video. Thomas straightened his tie, his reflection showing the same impassive expression he'd worn in countless trials. But his eyes held something new, the cold, calculated look of a predator preparing to strike. They thought they'd won. They thought their perfect lies had secured their victory. But Thomas Reeves hadn't spent 2 decades defending killers without learning how justice really worked. Sometimes, justice needed to be served cold, calculated, and without mercy. And mercy was the last thing on his mind as he walked out of that courthouse, leaving behind the last traces of the man who'd trusted his wife and best friend. The man who emerged was someone else entirely, someone who would make them regret ever attempting to destroy him. The storm outside had reached its peak as Thomas drove home, his mind already formulating plans. They'd celebrated too early, revealed their hand too soon. Now it was his turn to play, and he intended to make sure every single person who'd betrayed him would pay the full price for their perfect lies. Chapter 4. Broken Trust. Thomas sat motionless in Detective Keller's apartment, his eyes fixed on the video playing on her laptop. The sound of champagne glasses clinking and celebratory laughter filled the small space as Adriana and Michael's betrayal played out in high definition. Samantha Keller's cat, Mr. Whiskers, brushed against Thomas's ankles, but he barely noticed. His focus remained on the screen, memorizing faces, cataloging each person who'd raised a glass to toast his destruction. Here, Samantha pushed a glass of whiskey across her desk. You look like you need this. Thomas took the glass, but didn't drink. Tell me everything. Samantha pulled out a thick file folder. Henderson and Associates has been laundering money for the Callahan crime family for years. Your cases were getting too close to exposing their operation. The Martinez case? Those murders weren't random business competitors. They were people who threatened to expose the connection. And my wife. Thomas's voice carried a dangerous edge. She's been involved longer than you think. The PR department gives her perfect cover to control the narrative, bury stories, pressure witnesses. Samantha hesitated. There's more. 5 years ago, Michael Whitman helped my ex-husband frame me for corruption. I lost my detective shield, spent 2 years fighting to clear my name. Thomas finally took a sip of whiskey. Why help me now? Because I recognize the look in your eyes. It's the same one I saw in my mirror for 2 years. You're not going to just walk away from this. You're going to make them pay. And you want to help? I want justice. Samantha opened her laptop, pulling up files. The firm's managing partner, Richard Henderson, died 6 months ago. Heart attack, according to the official report. But look at these toxicology results I managed to get. Thomas studied the report. Poison. Exactly. And guess who handled all the paperwork for his estate? Michael. With your wife's help, Samantha pulled out more documents. They've been systematically positioning themselves for this. Each case you've been assigned in the past year was calculated to keep you distracted, focused on impossible wins while they built their trap. Thomas's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Need to meet. Found something in the books. Not secure to discuss over phone. Your sister's been digging, Samantha noted. She's good. Spotted the irregularities in their accounting before anyone else. She's also in danger, Thomas stated flatly. They killed Henderson for less. A knock at the door made them both tense. Samantha checked the security camera feed, then relaxed slightly. It's Caroline Callahan. Thomas's hand moved to his side instinctively. Robert Callahan's daughter? And our best chance at bringing down her father's organization. She's been gathering evidence for months. Caroline Callahan entered the apartment, her designer clothes and perfectly manicured appearance at odds with the determination in her eyes. Mr. Reeves, I've been waiting to meet you. Why? Because you're not the only one they've betrayed. Caroline pulled out a USB drive. My father's organization has corrupted everything it touches, including your firm. I've watched them destroy good people, tear families apart. It needs to end. Thomas studied her carefully. Your own family? Family doesn't frame innocent people for murder. Caroline inserted the drive into Samantha's laptop, or forced teenage girls to spy on their fathers. Lauren Martinez, Thomas realized. She's been terrified. Your daughter Rebecca has been helping her gather information, but they're in over their heads. The documents they found in James Martinez's study? That's just the surface. The laptop screen filled with emails, contracts, and financial records. Thomas recognized Michael's writing style, Adriana's signature. Years of careful manipulation laid bare in digital form. There's more, Caroline continued. Your firm's IT manager, Kevin Walsh, they're blackmailing him. He's been maintaining secret servers with years of incriminating data. Michael threatened to expose his gambling debts to his wife, destroy his family. Thomas absorbed each piece of information, building a mental map of connections and vulnerabilities. How deep does it go? All the way to the top, Samantha answered. Judges, police officials, even some federal agents. The Callahan organization has spent decades building this network. And my wife. Thomas's voice remained steady, but his grip on the whiskey glass tightened. Caroline met his gaze. She wasn't just Michael's lover. She was his connection to my father's organization. That PR position? It gave her access to everything, witnesses, evidence, media coverage. She could control the entire narrative. Thomas stood, moving to the window. Below, the city continued its normal rhythm, unaware of the corruption festering beneath its surface. They thought they could destroy me, use me as a scapegoat, and walk away clean. What are you going to do? Samantha asked. Thomas turned back to them, his expression reminiscent of a predator assessing its prey. I'm going to take everything from them. Their power, their freedom, their dignity. And I'm going to make sure they live long enough to watch it all burn. You'll need help, Caroline said. No. Thomas's voice cut through the room. I need soldiers. People who understand that once we start this, there's no middle ground. No mercy. Samantha nodded slowly. I know some people. Good cops who've been pushed aside for not playing along. Court clerks who've kept their own records. And I have access to my father's inner circle, Caroline added. People who've been waiting for a chance to break free. Thomas picked up his phone, dialing Rachel's number. Meet me at your office. 1 hour. He turned to Samantha. Get your files ready. All of them. What's the plan? Caroline asked. First, we protect our allies. Rachel, Rebecca, Lauren, Kevin Walsh, anyone who's been gathering evidence. Then we start dismantling their operation piece by piece. They'll fight back, Samantha warned. Thomas's expression hardened. I'm counting on it. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late. They wanted to frame me for murder? I'll give them something much worse. The complete destruction of everything they've built. As he left Samantha's apartment, Thomas's phone buzzed again. A message from Adriana. We need to talk. For Rebecca's sake. He deleted the message without responding. The time for talks had ended the moment she'd raised that champagne glass to celebrate his downfall. Chapter 5. Gathering Storm. Rebecca Reeves sat in her room, surrounded by printouts of emails and documents she and Lauren had collected. Her best friend lay on the bed, nervously twisting a strand of hair around her finger. Your dad saw the video? Lauren asked. Yes. Rebecca continued organizing the papers. He didn't say much, but I've never seen him like this. It's like something broke inside him, but instead of falling apart, he turned to steel. Lauren sat up. They're going to kill my father if they find out he kept records. They won't. Rebecca's voice carried the same quiet certainty she'd inherited from her father. Dad won't let that happen. A soft knock at Rebecca's window made both girls jump. Rachel Reeves appeared, gesturing for them to let her in. Aunt Rachel. Rebecca helped her climb through. What are you doing here? Getting you both out. Pack a bag. Essentials only. You got 5 minutes. What? Why? Rachel was already gathering the documents scattered across the desk. Because your mother just called an emergency partners meeting at the firm. And Marcus Rodriguez overheard them discussing a cleanup operation. Lauren's face went pale. Like what they did to Mr. Foster? Exactly. Your father's already moving Kevin Walsh and his family to a safe house. We need to go. Now. Downstairs, they could hear Adriana's voice on the phone. Yes, Michael. Everything's under control here. The girls don't suspect anything. Rebecca moved quickly, shoving clothes and her laptop into a backpack. Lauren did the same, her hands shaking slightly. Fire escape, Rachel whispered. Marcus is waiting in the alley with a car. They climbed down silently, years of teenage sneaking out finally serving a vital purpose. Marcus Rodriguez stood beside a nondescript sedan, his military training evident in his alert posture and scanning gaze. Everyone in, he ordered quietly. Stay low. As they pulled away, Rebecca saw her mother's car turn into the driveway. She's home early. Right on schedule, Marcus commented. She'll find your rooms empty, call Michael, and they'll start searching all the obvious places. But we're not going anywhere obvious. Are we? Lauren asked. No. Rachel turned to face them from the front seat. We're going somewhere they'll never think to look. Across town, Janet Cooper paced her small office at Henderson and Associates. The recording device in her desk drawer felt like a ticking bomb. She'd been gathering evidence for months, conversations, threats, suspicious meetings. Each new file added to the weight of her conscience. A knock at her door made her freeze. Come in? Thomas Reeves entered, closing the door behind him. Janet felt her pulse quicken. She'd always been slightly afraid of him, even before discovering the truth about the firm. Miss Cooper. His voice was surprisingly gentle. We need to talk about the recordings. Janet's hand moved instinctively toward her desk drawer. What recordings? The ones you've been making since Adriana threatened to destroy your career. The ones that prove she and Michael have been manipulating evidence, threatening witnesses, corrupting the entire legal process. How did you? Because you're not the only one they threatened. And right now, you have a choice to make. Janet swallowed hard. They'll kill me if they find out. They'll kill you anyway. Thomas's bluntness was oddly reassuring. The only question is whether you die helping expose them, or die as another tragic accident they used to cover their tracks. Her hand trembled as she opened the drawer. There's more than just recordings. I have emails, documents they asked me to misplace during discovery. Good. Thomas placed a burner phone on her desk. Pack everything essential from your office. When you get home, pack a bag. Someone will contact you on this phone with an address. Don't use your car. Don't tell anyone where you're going. What about my family? Already being taken care of. Samantha Keller has a team moving them to a safe location. Janet felt tears well up in her eyes. I never wanted to be part of this. None of us did. But now we're going to end it. At the courthouse, Frank Torres was completing his final security rounds. 20 years as a cop before being forced out for whistleblowing had taught him to trust his instincts. Those same instincts had led him to keep detailed logs of everything he'd witnessed at the courthouse. Mr. Torres? Michael Whitman's voice made him turn. Working late again? Just finishing up, sir. Michael stepped closer, his usual friendly smile in place. I've noticed you spent a lot of time watching the security cameras. Taking notes. Very thorough. Frank kept his expression neutral. Part of the job, sir. Of course. Given recent events with poor David Foster, I'd hate to see anything happen to another valuable member of our courthouse family. The threat hung in the air between them. Frank thought of the encrypted files he'd stored in multiple locations, the dead man's switch he'd set up to release everything if anything happened to him. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Whitman. I'll be sure to stay safe. Michael's smile widened slightly. See that you do. As Michael walked away, Frank pulled out his phone, sending a prearranged signal to Thomas. The pieces were falling into place, and Michael had just confirmed their suspicions. The storm was gathering, and soon it would break over all their heads. Chapter 6. Countermove. Thomas stood in his new apartment, a sparse one-bedroom that bore no resemblance to the comfortable suburban home he'd shared with Adriana. Maps and documents covered one wall, connected by red strings that tracked relationships, money flows, and potential pressure points. His phone buzzed. Another text from Adriana. The divorce papers are ready. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. He deleted it without responding, just as he had deleted the previous dozen messages. Let her think he was falling apart, drowning his sorrows in alcohol and self-pity. The truth was far more dangerous. A knock at the door, the specific pattern they'd established. Thomas opened it to find Marcus Rodriguez, carrying a laptop and several external hard drives. Kevin Walsh came through, Marcus reported, setting up the equipment. He's been documenting everything. Emails, financial records, even recordings of private meetings in the conference rooms. Location? Safe house in Vermont. My old unit commander's place. Off the grid, no digital footprint. Thomas nodded. Kevin Walsh's evidence would be crucial, but only if he stayed alive long enough to testify. The IT manager had been collecting dirt on the firm's illegal activities for years, insurance against the day they might turn on him. What about Rebecca and Lauren? Secure. Rachel's got them, somewhere even Adriana won't think to look. Marcus pulled up files on the laptop. But we've got bigger problems. The firm's making moves against you professionally. Thomas scanned the documents. Disciplinary complaints, allegations of evidence tampering, witnesses suddenly remembering misconduct during old cases. Michael's pushing for disbarment, Marcus continued. They're trying to destroy your credibility before you can fight back. Let them try. Thomas's voice carried no emotion. Each attack is another piece of evidence, another thread we can pull. His phone rang. Caroline Callahan. We have a problem. Father's getting suspicious. He's called a meeting of his inner circle. When? Tomorrow night. Michael and Adriana will be there. Thomas absorbed this information, adjusting mental calculations. Good. Let them meet. Let them think they're in control. There's more. Caroline's voice dropped lower. I found something in Patricia Henderson's medical records. Richard's death wasn't the first time they used poison. Thomas remembered Richard Henderson's widow, how quickly she'd accepted the heart attack explanation. She was involved? No, she was a victim. They've been dosing her for months. Small amounts, making her seem unstable, paranoid. Any accusation she makes about Richard's death can be dismissed as grief-induced delusions. Get her out. Today. Already done. Samantha has her at a private medical facility. They're documenting everything. Thomas ended the call, turning to Marcus. We need Janet Cooper's recordings. Now. She's scared. She should be. But she'll be dead if she stays at the firm. Thomas picked up his coat. I'll handle it personally. At Henderson and Associates, Janet Cooper was already regretting her decision to stay late. The office felt different at night, threatening. She jumped at a noise. Michael Whitman's voice from the partner's wing, raised in anger. Find them. I don't care how. A crash of something being thrown. Thomas's daughter and the Martinez girl have evidence that could destroy everything. Janet's hands shook as she gathered files from her hidden drawer. The recording device contained months of conversations, proof of corruption that went far beyond normal legal misconduct. A shadow in her doorway made her freeze. Ms. Cooper. Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. Time ago. She didn't hesitate, grabbing her bag and the files. They moved silently through the dark office, avoiding the partner's wing where Michael's tirade continued. In the parking garage, Samantha Keller waited in an unmarked car. Your family's already safe, she told Janet as they pulled away. Your husband understood completely when we showed him the evidence. Janet clutched her files, tears running down her face. I should have come forward sooner. You did what you could to survive, Thomas said from the front seat. Now you're going to help us end this. His phone buzzed again. Adriana, switching tactics. You're making enemies you can't afford, Thomas. Think about Rebecca's future. Thomas's expression hardened. The mention of their daughter wasn't the leverage Adriana thought it was. It was just another reason to make sure his retribution was complete. Sir? Marcus's voice cut through Thomas's thoughts. Rachel's calling. Thomas switched his phone to speaker. Go ahead. The girls found more, Rachel reported. Lauren had a hidden camera in her father's study. She recorded a meeting between Michael and the Callahan family lieutenants. They're planning to move against you tonight. Expected. Thomas's voice remained cold. They're getting desperate. Thomas. Rachel hesitated. Adriana was there. She's the one pushing for immediate action. Said something about making sure you disappear like David Foster. In the back seat, Janet Cooper stifled a gasp. Thomas merely nodded, as if receiving confirmation of something he'd already known. Send the video to Samantha, he ordered. Then get the girl somewhere else. Don't tell me where. They dropped Janet at a safe house, her evidence added to the growing arsenal they were building. Thomas watched the house until he was certain the security team was in place. "They'll come after you next," Samantha said as they drove away. "I know." Thomas checked his watch. "The firm should be receiving my response to their disbarment attempt right about now." Samantha glanced at him. "What did you do?" "Filed a detailed complaint with the Bar Association, complete with evidence of Michael's witness tampering, Adriana's evidence manipulation, and enough financial irregularities to trigger an automatic audit. That's going to push them to act faster." "Good." Thomas's phone lit up with a call from Michael. He let it ring. Let them make mistakes. Let them show their hand. Back at his apartment, Thomas reviewed the new evidence. Lauren's video showed more than just the meeting. It showed Michael and Adriana discussing previous removals of people who'd threatened their operation. The confession was clear, damning, and completely admissible in court. A knock at his door. Frank Torres with his security logs. "They're cleaning house at the courthouse," he reported. 3 judges suddenly announced early retirement. 2 clerks called in sick indefinitely. "They're running scared," Thomas noted, adding the information to his wall of evidence. "Not scared enough." Frank pulled out his phone, showing Thomas a message. "They just posted armed security at all firm entrances. Michael's called an emergency partner meeting for tomorrow morning." Thomas's phone buzzed again. Adriana had switched to email. "You're forcing my hand, Thomas. Remember when you taught me about mutually assured destruction? Don't make me prove I was paying attention." He forwarded the email to Samantha without comment. Another piece of evidence, another nail in their coffin. The night deepened as Thomas and his allies consolidated their positions. Marcus coordinated security for their witnesses. Rachel moved the girls again. Samantha worked her contacts in law enforcement, building support for the coming storm. And Thomas waited, his rage now a cold, focused weapon. They tried to destroy him, to take everything he'd built. Instead, they created their own destruction. A man with nothing left to lose and the knowledge to tear their world apart. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new betrayals. But tonight, in the quiet of his Spartan apartment, Thomas Reeves allowed himself a small, dangerous smile. The next move was his, and he intended to make it count. The storm wasn't just gathering anymore. It was about to break. And when it did, no amount of money, power, or connections would save them from the justice they'd so richly earned. Chapter 7. The Trap. The annual Henderson and Associates charity gala buzzed with nervous energy. Michael Whitman stood at the podium, his practiced smile in place as he addressed the crowd of legal and business elite. "Integrity in law isn't just a slogan," he proclaimed, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "It's the foundation of everything we do at Henderson and Associates." In the service corridor behind the ballroom, Thomas Reeves checked his watch. Beside him, Samantha Keller adjusted her earpiece, listening to updates from her team. "Federal agents are in position," she whispered. "All exits covered." Thomas nodded, his expression carved from stone. "Caroline?" Her father's security team just responded to an emergency at their warehouse. Marcus's former unit is keeping them busy. "Kevin?" Samantha checked her phone. "In position. Ready to trigger the server lockdown on your signal." Thomas pulled up the building schematics on his tablet, marking their path to Michael's office. The safe they needed to access was hidden behind a painting, a fact Caroline had learned during one of Michael's more boastful moments with her sister Patricia. "Remember," Thomas's voice was low, dangerous. "The federal raid is just the distraction. While they're securing the ballroom, we get what we need from that safe." "You really think Michael kept physical evidence?" "He kept everything. Insurance against the Callahans, blackmail material on judges, proof of all their schemes. A man like Michael doesn't trust digital copies alone." Michael's voice continued to drift from the ballroom. "Our commitment to justice has never wavered." "Lying until the end," Samantha muttered. Thomas checked his burner phone, a message from Rebecca. "Mom just got the alert about the warehouse. She's trying to reach Michael." Perfect. Each piece was falling into place. At exactly 9:15 p.m., multiple things happened simultaneously. Federal agents burst into the ballroom. Kevin Walsh's program locked down the firm's servers and began uploading files to secure locations, and the fire alarm system activated. Marcus's addition to cause maximum chaos. Thomas and Samantha moved swiftly through the confusion, their path to Michael's office clear. Years of defending criminals had taught Thomas how to move unnoticed, how to blend into shadows and slip past distracted guards. Michael's office door yielded easily to Samantha's expertise. Inside, Thomas went straight to the painting, an original Monet that Richard Henderson had purchased years ago. Behind it, just as Caroline had described, sat a wall safe. "How long?" Thomas asked. Samantha examined the lock. 2 minutes, maybe less. As she worked, Thomas's phone vibrated, Adriana calling. He declined to call, imagining her panic as she realized their carefully constructed world was crumbling. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, decades of corruption lay neatly organized in folders and USB drives. Thomas began photographing everything, while Samantha transferred the contents to her secure bag. "Thomas." Samantha's voice drew his attention to one folder. Inside lay proof that Michael and Adriana had orchestrated not just the recent murders, but 4 others over the years. Each killing disguised as an accident or random crime. Each victim a threat to their operation. Court clerk who asked too many questions about missing files. Thomas read from one document. Private investigator looking into Richard Henderson's death. Reporter investigating the Callahan family's legal connections. And David Foster, Samantha added, finding another file. They killed him because he was going to warn you? Footsteps in the hallway made them freeze. Then Marcus's voice through their earpieces. "Michael just slipped away from the federal agents. He's heading your way." Thomas motioned Samantha behind the door, taking position beside the desk. Moments later, Michael burst in, his confident facade shattered by panic. "Looking for this?" Thomas held up the folder of murder evidence. Michael spun around, his face twisting with rage. "You? Me?" Thomas remained perfectly still, his voice devoid of emotion. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? That I'd just accept being framed and walk away? You don't understand what you're dealing with." Michael's hand moved toward his jacket. "The Callahans are being dismantled as we speak." Thomas cut him off. "Caroline's been very helpful. So has Patricia Henderson. Now that she's free of the poison you and Adriana were feeding her." Michael's eyes widened. "Patricia, Richard's widow, the one you've been slowly poisoning to make her appear unstable. She's providing quite compelling testimony about her husband's murder. You're bluffing? Am I?" Thomas pulled out his phone, playing a recording. Adriana's voice discussing Richard Henderson's unfortunate accident with Michael, planning how to manipulate Patricia's medication. "It's over, Michael." Samantha stepped out, her badge displayed. "The only question is how many murders we can prove you ordered." Michael lunged for the desk drawer, where Thomas knew he kept a gun. But Thomas was ready. Years of tension and betrayal fueled his movement as he grabbed Michael's arm, twisting it with brutal efficiency. The crack of breaking bone was followed by Michael's howl of pain. "That's for David Foster," Thomas said calmly, watching his former friend crumple to the ground. "The rest will come through the justice system you corrupted." Federal agents burst in, securing Michael as he spat threats and promises of revenge. Thomas watched impassively, the folder of evidence secure in his hands. "Mr. Reeves?" Agent Wilson approached. "We've secured the ballroom. Mrs. Reeves is asking to speak with you." "No." Thomas's refusal was absolute. "She can talk to her lawyers. Tonight, tomorrow, for the next 25 years. That's all she deserves to talk to." His phone buzzed with another message from Rebecca. "Dad, it worked. Lauren's father just called. He's ready to testify. Says he has recordings of everything." Thomas allowed himself a small nod. James Martinez's testimony would be the final nail in their coffin, proving how deep the corruption went. In the chaos of the raid, Caroline Callahan slipped away unseen, her part played perfectly. Her father's organization would never recover from this night. Thomas watched as Michael was led away in handcuffs, his designer's suit wrinkled, his confident smirk replaced by impotent rage. Soon, Adriana would join him. Their perfect lies had finally caught up with them. And Thomas Reeves, the man they'd tried to destroy, stood in the ruins of their empire, holding the evidence that would ensure they spent the rest of their lives paying for their betrayal. "Ready?" Samantha asked, securing the last of the evidence. Thomas took one final look around the office where so many corrupt deals had been made, so many lives destroyed. Let's finish this. Chapter 8. Justice Served. The evidence room at the federal building hummed with activity as agents processed the mountain of documentation seized from Henderson and Associates. Thomas stood at the observation window, watching Adriana's interview through the one-way glass. Mrs. Reeves, Agent Wilson's voice came through the speaker. Let's talk about Richard Henderson's death. Adriana sat straight-backed in her chair, her designer outfit incongruous in the stark interview room. I want my lawyer. Your lawyer's been arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Agent Wilson laid out photographs. These show you entering the evidence room on multiple occasions. Care to explain? I have nothing to say. Then perhaps you'd like to explain these. More photos appeared. Surveillance footage of Adriana meeting with key witnesses, documents showing transfer of funds, recordings of threats made to Janet Cooper. Thomas observed each micro-expression that crossed his wife's face, noting the exact moment she realized the depth of their exposure. 20 years of marriage had taught him her tells. The slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible tension in her shoulders. Mrs. Reeves, Wilson continued, we have evidence linking you and Mr. Whitman to 6 murders. The DA is seeking the death penalty. Now might be a good time to cooperate. Adriana's mask finally cracked. I want a deal. Behind Thomas, Samantha made a quiet sound of satisfaction. They always break, even the strong ones. She was never strong, Thomas replied. Just good at pretending. The door opened, admitting James Martinez and his daughter Lauren. James looked exhausted but determined, clutching a briefcase full of recordings. Mr. Reeves? James couldn't quite meet Thomas's eyes. I'm sorry. They threatened Lauren. I had no choice. You have one now. Thomas's voice remained neutral. Make it count. Lauren squeezed her father's arm. We brought everything, Dad. All the recordings, the documents, everything you kept to protect us. James nodded, squaring his shoulders. I'm ready to testify. About all of it. The murders, the fraud, how they used my business to launder money for the Callahans. In another interview room, Michael Whitman faced his own reckoning. His broken arm was set and bandaged, but his arrogance remained undiminished. You really think this will stick? He sneered at the federal prosecutors. I have connections. Your connections are being arrested as we speak, Thomas interrupted, entering the room. Judge Harrison just confessed to accepting bribes. Judge Wells provided records of every case you corrupted. Even your friends in the DA's office are scrambling to make deals. Michael's facade cracked slightly. You can't prove 6 murders. Thomas laid out crime scene photos. David Foster, Richard Henderson, the reporter who asked too many questions, the investigator who got too close, all killed on your orders with my wife's help. And we have proof of each one. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Michael's voice dripped venom, playing the righteous avenger. No, Michael, I'm not enjoying it. I'm ensuring it. There's a difference. Thomas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You try to destroy me, frame me for murder, turn my daughter against me. Now you get to spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing that I'm the one who put you there. Michael lunged across the table, but federal agents quickly restrained him. Thomas didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He simply watched as his former friend was dragged away, screaming threats and promises of revenge. In the evidence processing room, Rachel Reeves worked with forensic accountants to unravel the firm's financial web. Her careful documentation had exposed millions in laundered money, bribes disguised as legal fees, payoffs hidden in shell companies. The Callahan connection is confirmed, she reported to Thomas. Caroline provided banking records going back 15 years. They used the firm to clean over $200 million in illegal profits. Marcus Rodriguez entered, his military bearing evident in his precise movements. Kevin Walsh's server dump is a gold mine. Emails, recorded conversations, video feeds from the conference rooms. They documented everything, thinking it made them untouchable. Their insurance policy became their downfall, Samantha observed. Patricia Henderson arrived next, supported by medical staff. Weeks of treatment had cleared the poison from her system, restoring her clarity and strength. They killed Richard, she stated firmly. I have proof, medical records showing the gradual poisoning, documents Richard gathered before his death. He was going to expose them, so they murdered him and tried to make me look insane. The evidence mounted hour by hour. Janet Cooper's recordings revealed years of witness tampering and evidence manipulation. Frank Torres's security logs documented countless suspicious meetings and unexplained access to restricted areas. Judge Margaret Wells provided the final blow, detailed records of bribes, threats, and corrupted cases stretching back over a decade. Her testimony implicated other judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement officials who'd been part of the Callahan organization's network. The arrests made headlines nationwide. Prestigious law firm exposed AS criminal enterprise, screamed the New York Times. Murder, money laundering, and corruption at Henderson and Associates, declared the Wall Street Journal. Thomas watched the news coverage from his sparse apartment, his expression unchanging as reporters detailed each revelation. The video of Adriana and Michael's champagne celebration played on several channels, their mockery of his trust now exposed to the world. His phone rang. Rebecca. Dad? It's done. Mom took the deal. 25 years in exchange for testifying against the Callahan organization. And Michael? Multiple life sentences. No possibility of parole. The DA got everything they wanted. Thomas ended the call, staring at the wall of evidence that had brought down an empire of corruption. Each piece represented a betrayal, a lie, a life destroyed in the pursuit of power and wealth. The champagne cork sat on his desk, his trophy from their celebration of his supposed destruction. Now it marked his victory, his vengeance, his justice. A knock at the door revealed Caroline Callahan. My father's gone, she reported. Private plane to a non-extradition country. But his organization is finished. The evidence you gathered destroyed everything. He'll rebuild, Thomas noted. No, Caroline's voice held firm conviction. He'll spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up with him. That's punishment enough. Thomas nodded once, acknowledging her choice. The daughter who'd helped destroy her father's criminal empire had earned the right to decide his fate. Chapter 9, New Beginning. 1 year later, Thomas sat in his new office, reviewing case files. The space was smaller than his old corner office at Henderson and Associates, but it served a different purpose. Here, he helped those who'd been wrongly accused, using his experience to fight the corruption he'd helped expose. Rebecca, home from her first year of law school, worked at a desk nearby. Her experience had shaped her career choice. She was determined to become the kind of lawyer who fought for justice, not profit. Another wrongful conviction case? She asked, noticing the files on his desk. Similar to Martinez's situation, Thomas replied. Evidence too perfect, witnesses too certain. Classic signs of manipulation. Laura Martinez entered, carrying more files. She joined the practice as their investigator, her first-hand experience with corruption making her exceptionally effective at uncovering truth. Dad's doing well in witness protection, she reported. The testimony he provided helped convict 3 more judges last month. Thomas nodded, appreciating how James Martinez had ultimately chosen truth over fear. The man's comprehensive recordings had proved invaluable in dismantling the corrupt network that had ensnared them all. Samantha Keller arrived next, her detective's badge restored along with her reputation. She now headed a task force specifically targeting corruption in the legal system. New case, she announced, dropping a file on Thomas's desk. Another firm showing signs of evidence tampering. Thought you might be interested. Always. Thomas opened the file, his expression focused. He developed a particular expertise in spotting the signs of corruption, the subtle patterns that indicated manipulation of justice. Janet Cooper, now Thomas's law partner, entered with coffee for everyone. Her experience with Adriana's threats had transformed her from a timid associate into a fierce advocate for whistleblowers. Judge Wells called, she reported. She's established a formal oversight committee. Wants us to consult on developing better safeguards against corruption. Rachel arrived with Marcus, both looking satisfied after another successful investigation. Their forensic accounting firm had become the go-to resource for exposing financial crimes in the legal system. "You should see this." Rachel handed Thomas a newspaper. Caroline Callahan's foundation was making headlines, providing support and legal assistance to families affected by organized crime. Thomas read the article, noting how Caroline had transformed her family's dark legacy into a force for good. She'd chosen a different path from her father, just as Thomas had chosen justice over revenge. His phone buzzed, a message from Frank Torres about suspicious activity at another law firm. The former security guard's network of observers continued to grow, creating an informal watchdog system within the legal community. "Dad!" Rebecca's voice drew his attention. She held an old family photo, one taken before the betrayals, before the lies. "Was it worth it? Everything we lost?" Thomas studied the photograph, his marriage, his career at the prestigious firm, his comfortable suburban life. All built on perfect lies, all destroyed by truth. "We didn't lose anything real," he replied. "We lost illusions, comfortable lies. What we gained was truth, justice, purpose." Rebecca nodded, understanding. She'd seen her father transform from a successful but complacent lawyer into a relentless force for justice. The man who'd been betrayed had become something stronger, more dangerous to those who corrupted the law. The champagne cork sat in his desk drawer, a reminder of the night his enemies had celebrated too early. Now it served as a warning to others. Justice might be delayed, but it would never be denied. A knock at the door revealed Judge Wells, her presence a testament to how much had changed. "Thomas, we have another situation brewing in the Superior Court. 3 judges showing patterns similar to what we saw at Henderson and Associates." "Send me the files," Thomas replied, his expression hardening. The predator that his betrayers had created stirred beneath his surface. "We'll handle it, like we handle the others?" Samantha asked, a knowing glint in her eye. "Exactly like that." Thomas stood, gathering his team with a glance. "We know the signs now. We know where to look. And we know what happens to those who corrupt justice." Lauren pulled up the case files on her tablet. "The patterns match. Evidence too clean. Witness testimonies too perfect. Just like they did with my dad," Rebecca added, her law school training already showing her analysis. Janet began organizing their resources. "I'll contact our network. Frank's people can start surveillance, and Rachel can trace the money trails." Thomas watched his team mobilize, each member knowing their role in exposing corruption. They'd become something unique in the legal world, a force that corrupt lawyers and judges feared, a name whispered in warning through the halls of power. "They never understood," he said quietly to Samantha. "When they tried to destroy me, they created something worse. Someone who knows all their tricks, all their hiding places. Someone who won't stop until the corruption is burned out." "No mercy?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "None." Thomas picked up the champagne cork, a cold smile touching his lips. "They taught me that lesson themselves." The last news they'd heard of Michael and Adriana came through official channels. Michael had attempted to bargain for better conditions, offering more evidence of corruption. Adriana served her sentence in silence, her attempts to appeal denied by judges who'd once been her allies. Robert Callahan remained in exile, but his organization lay in ruins, dismantled piece by the evidence his daughter had helped expose. Caroline's foundation grew stronger each year, turning victims into advocates, fear into strength. Frank Torres stopped by, now a respected security consultant teaching others to spot the signs of corruption. "Never thought we'd end up here," he remarked, surveying the busy office. "Neither did they," Thomas replied, his voice carrying the steel that had become his trademark. "That was their mistake." As night fell over the city, Thomas stood at his office window. Below, the lights of other law firms blazed against the darkness. Some still held secrets, still harbored corruption. But now they faced something they'd never expected. A man they'd tried to destroy, transformed into their worst nightmare. A man who'd learned from their betrayal that justice required not just law, but the will to enforce it without mercy. The champagne cork would remain in his drawer, a reminder of the price of betrayal and the power of truth. Let others see his transformation as tragic, his pursuit of justice as obsession. Thomas Reeves knew better. In trying to bury him in perfect lies, they had instead forged him into something unstoppable, a weapon aimed at the heart of corruption itself. And in the end, that was their greatest mistake and his perfect revenge. Epilogue, 10 years later. The Reeves and Cooper Law Group occupied 3 floors of a downtown building. Its reputation for exposing corruption and defending the wrongfully accused, making it one of the most respected firms in the country. Thomas Reeves sat in his corner office, reviewing case files with the same intensity that had become his trademark over the past decade. At 52, his hair had turned completely gray, but his brown eyes retained their predatory focus. The years hadn't softened him. If anything, they'd honed his dedication to destroying corruption wherever he found it. A knock at his door revealed Rebecca Reeves Martinez, now 37 and a partner in the firm. She'd married Lauren Martinez 5 years ago, their shared experience during the Henderson and Associates scandal having forged an unbreakable bond. "Dad, you need to see this." Rebecca placed a tablet on his desk. Michael Whitman was found dead in his cell this morning. Thomas read the report without expression. His former friend and betrayer had spent the last decade in maximum security, his multiple life sentences a testament to the lives he destroyed. Suicide? Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer. "They're calling it natural causes. Heart attack." Rebecca sat across from him. "Lauren's already investigating. Old habits die hard." Thomas nodded, appreciating how his daughter and daughter-in-law had become formidable investigators in their own right. Lauren's experience as James Martinez's daughter had given her unique insight into how corruption operated within families. "What about your mother?" he asked, his voice carrying no emotion when mentioning Adriana. "Still serving her sentence. The latest appeal was denied last month." Rebecca paused. "She's been asking to see you." "No." Thomas's refusal was absolute, just as it had been for the past decade. "She made her choice." The intercom buzzed, his assistant announcing Samantha Keller's arrival. The former detective, now head of the FBI's anti-corruption task force, entered carrying a thick file. "You're going to want to see this, Thomas." She laid out photographs and documents. "Remember Robert Callahan? Seems his past finally caught up with him." Thomas examined the evidence of Callahan's demise in his South American hideaway. "Caroline? She's been notified. Her foundation's actually helping some of his former associates transition to legitimate businesses." Samantha sat down, her dark skin lined with the years of fighting corruption. "It's strange, isn't it? How much has changed since that night at the charity gala?" Thomas's phone buzzed, a message from Janet Cooper. His law partner was in court, demolishing another prosecutor's case built on manufactured evidence. Over the years, Janet had transformed from a timid associate into one of the most feared defense attorneys in the state. "Rachel's forensic team found something interesting," Samantha continued. "Apparently, Michael had been writing a memoir, confessing everything." This drew Thomas's attention. Everything: names, dates, details of operations we never knew about. He was planning to use it as leverage for a sentence reduction. Samantha smiled grimly. Maybe that heart attack wasn't so natural after all. Thomas thought of the remaining Callahan organization members, still operating from the shadows. Even with their patriarch dead, they protected their interests ruthlessly. A familiar face appeared in his doorway. Frank Torres, his security company now responsible for protecting whistleblowers and witnesses across the country. "Thought you'd want to know," Frank said, entering the office. "Judge Wells's oversight committee just passed new regulations. All evidence handling will be monitored by independent observers. No more midnight visits to evidence rooms." Thomas allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. Margaret Wells had spent the past decade reforming the justice system from within, using her position to create safeguards against the kind of corruption that had almost destroyed him. Kevin Walsh called, Rebecca added. "His security firm's doing well. He's teaching at MIT now, showing students how to protect digital evidence from manipulation." After leaving witness protection, Kevin had established himself as an expert in digital forensics. His experience with Henderson and Associates had made him particularly effective at spotting attempts to corrupt electronic records. Marcus Rodriguez entered next, his military bearing unchanged by the years. His and Rachel's forensic accounting firm had become the gold standard for investigating financial crimes. "You'll appreciate this," Marcus said, pulling up data on his tablet. "Remember those offshore accounts Michael and Adriana set up? We finally cracked the last layer. Found something interesting." Thomas reviewed the information, evidence of a wider conspiracy connecting multiple law firms and judges across the country. The corruption they'd exposed at Henderson and Associates had been just one node in a vast network. "Already shared it with Caroline's foundation," Marcus continued. "They're coordinating with Samantha's task force." Rachel arrived, her expertise having made her one of the most respected forensic accountants in the field. "The money trails are clear now. We can trace corruption patterns across jurisdictions, spot the signs before they can hide the evidence." Thomas stood, moving to the wall where he kept his trophies. The champagne cork from that fateful night sat in a glass case, alongside newspaper headlines documenting their victories against corruption. Each item represented a battle won, a corrupt official exposed, a system cleaned of its rot. "Dad," Rebecca's voice drew his attention. "Lauren and I have been thinking. We want to expand the firm's reach. Open offices in other cities, create a network of lawyers and investigators dedicated to fighting corruption. Like what they had," Lauren added, entering the office. "But for justice instead of profit." Thomas studied his daughters, seeing in them the same fire, the same dedication to truth that their betrayal had awakened in him. They'd taken the lessons of the past and turned them into weapons for good. "Show me the plan," he said. As they laid out their proposal, Thomas reflected on the decade since his world had shattered. His comfortable suburban life had been replaced by something harder, more purposeful. The man who'd trusted blindly in the system had become its most feared adversary. His phone buzzed again, a message from James Martinez, still in witness protection but now working as a consultant, helping other businesses spot signs of criminal infiltration. "Your father's death made the news here," James wrote. "Lauren okay?" Thomas replied affirmatively, appreciating how James had become family over the years. Their shared experience of betrayal had forged bonds stronger than blood. Samantha pulled up more files on her tablet. "There's something else. Remember Patricia Henderson? She's been doing research, connecting deaths we thought were unrelated. Looks like Michael and Adriana's body count was higher than we knew." "Get me everything," Thomas ordered, his voice carrying the same cold determination that had driven him for a decade. "If there are more victims, their families deserve justice." Caroline Callahan arrived later that afternoon, her foundation having become a powerful force for reform. "Thought you should know we're implementing new programs, teaching lawyers and judges how to resist corruption, how to spot the signs of infiltration, using their own techniques against them," Thomas noted with approval. "Exactly. The best defense is knowledge." Caroline handed him a file. "Also, my sources say there's movement in the remnants of my father's organization. Some of the old guard aren't happy about Michael's memoir surfacing." Thomas absorbed this information, adding it to his mental map of allies and enemies. The war against corruption never really ended. It just changed forms, found new battlegrounds. A news alert flashed across his computer screen. Another law firm under investigation. Another judge accused of taking bribes. The system they'd helped expose 10 years ago was still being cleansed, still revealing new pockets of corruption. Like dominoes, Samantha observed. Each one that falls reveals connections to others. "Good," Thomas replied. "Let them fall." Rebecca and Lauren shared a look, understanding their father's relentless drive. They'd seen him transform from victim to avenger to something more, a symbol that made corrupt lawyers and judges check their shadows, question their security. "The difference is," Rebecca said, "now we have a network. Resources. People who know what to look for." "Thanks to you," Lauren added. "What they did to you, trying to frame you, destroy you, it created something they never expected." Thomas picked up the champagne cork, remembering the night of champagne and betrayal. They thought they could bury the truth in perfect lies. Instead, they created its greatest defender. The intercom buzzed again. Another case, another cry for help. Thomas gathered his team with a glance, each member moving. They'd spent a decade honing their skills, building their resources, expanding their reach. In her prison cell, Adriana Reeves watched the news of Michael's death with understanding. She'd known this day would come. The past always caught up, one way or another. Her request to see Thomas had been denied again, but she'd expected that. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. Some wounds wouldn't heal. Thomas worked late into the night, as he often did. The comfortable lawyer, who'd trusted the system, had died the night of that champagne party. In his place stood a man who'd made it his life's mission to expose corruption, to protect truth, to ensure justice prevailed. The champagne cork caught the light as he placed it back in its case. Let it stand as a warning to others, a reminder that sometimes, in trying to destroy a good man, you create something far more dangerous, something that never forgets, never forgives, and never stops fighting for justice. And in law firms and judges' chambers across the country, corrupt officials checked their security, questioned their allies, and feared the day Thomas Reeves would turn his attention to them. The man they tried to frame had become their worst nightmare. A relentless force for justice, backed by a network of dedicated warriors who'd learned from his example. The perfect lies had failed. Truth had prevailed. And Thomas Reeves, the man they'd tried to destroy, had transformed their betrayal into a weapon that would hunt corruption until his dying breath. As midnight approached, Thomas reviewed one final file, a new case, another chance to expose corruption. Rebecca and Lauren had gone home, but would return early, ready to continue the fight. Samantha's task force would coordinate with Caroline's foundation. Marcus and Rachel would trace the money. Janet would prepare the legal strategy, and Frank's team would protect their witnesses. The system that had almost destroyed him now feared him. The corrupt power brokers who'd once laughed at his downfall now jumped at shadows. And somewhere in the city, another champagne party celebrated another perfect lie. Not knowing that Thomas Reeves and his team were already on their trail, ready to expose their corruption and bring them to justice. Some prices needed to be paid. Some lessons had to be learned, and some men, when pushed too far, became the very thing their enemies feared most. An incorruptible force for justice, fueled by betrayal, armed with truth, and dedicated to ensuring that no perfect lie would ever go unexposed. The war continued, but Thomas Reeves had long since stopped fighting for victory. He fought for justice, for truth, for the principle that corruption, no matter how deeply rooted or perfectly hidden, would eventually be exposed. And in that fight, he remained undefeated, unforgiving, and unstoppable. The perfect lies had created their perfect nemesis. And Thomas Reeves intended to ensure they regretted that creation until their dying day. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.